Good morning, and welcome to a show we like to call the Dallas Download, the show where we keep you in the know on what's trending, what's happening, and what's actually worth your time. You know, so you don't have to scroll for 3 hours to figure it out. I'm Kayla, and this week we've got this.
You can start to see, am I getting enough protein, enough fiber? Am I staying hydrated throughout the day?
But once I realized it was like, a kind of a sincere, discerning role, that was even greater. It was an opportunity to do something that was a little different.
All that and more right here on the Dallas Download.
Do you ever dream of uncovering lost treasure, exploring ancient tunnels, or even chasing down history's greatest mysteries? You know, Josh Gates lives that adventure for real. And he's back with brand new seasons of Expedition Unknown and Expedition Files on Discovery Channel. Fresh off a Daytime Emmy win, Josh's latest expeditions dig deeper than ever, from inside Egypt's Great Pyramid to tracking hidden treasures around the world. Josh, it's great to see you here.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right, I guess without giving out too much away or spoiling it for everybody, what is one moment this season that you thought to yourself, I can't believe we're actually pulling this off?
I think it's our season premiere, which is this big 2-hour, 2-part special on the Great Pyramid of Giza. And look, this building, which is 4,500 years old, has always inspired conspiracy theories and mystery. And so we are going to crawl through every inch of the Great Pyramid, sections that are closed to the public. We're going to descend deep beneath the pyramid into the bedrock itself. And to be down there in those tunnels was just such an absolute, electric thrill. And to take our viewers with us, that's the moment where I was like, I can't believe we're doing this.
You blend science, history, and adventure better than anyone, maybe even Han Solo when he's out adventuring a little bit. How do you keep the sense of wonder alive while still chasing the facts?
I mean, that's not hard at all, because these stories have such an incredible natural hook. I mean, look at this season. We're doing, looking for lost passages in the Great Pyramid of Giza, searching for a sunken Nazi submarine, having a real-life Goonies adventure on the Oregon coast. I mean, these stories are so exciting in and of themselves that it's easy to be enthusiastic about them, to be just pulled along for the ride, because these mysteries are just so enduring.
And it's always a mystery, and it's always surprising. Is there an expedition this season that surprised you or maybe took an unexpected turn?
We wanted to do something to honor the 40th anniversary of the Goonies. It's a movie that is so near and dear to me and was so seminal for me growing up. And I was shocked to learn, as I'm sure a lot of people will be, that the Goonies is kind of based on a true story, in that there was an actual Spanish galleon that wrecked off the Oregon coast that inspired the screenwriters of the Goonies. And this is not some legend. This is not some myth. This is an archaeological fact. And so we are going to Oregon to investigate the remains of this Spanish shipwreck and to see if there's any treasure out there and to look for booty traps and all that great Goonies stuff. So it's going to be an awesome adventure.
Team, you guys want to go look for some treasure? I'm in.
Yes.
Okay. Fans love both Expedition Unknown and Expedition Files. Can you give us the elevator pitch? What is the biggest difference between the two shows and why people should be tuned in for both hours?
Sure. I mean, Expedition Unknown is our boots on the ground exploration adventure show. So we spend the whole hour, or in the season premiere, 2 hours, investigating far-flung mysteries around the world. That's where we're going to be crawling in tunnels, macheting through jungles, diving into the unknown. Expedition Files, we are able to tackle 3 stories per hour, and these are incredibly iconic mysteries. I serve as a kind of guide through those stories, taking our viewers into the past, meeting experts and authors and historians that have, revelations, breaking news about some of the most famous cases in history. So that's really kind of pulling open the adventure filing cabinet and looking into these really awesome stories. And Expedition Unknown invites you to literally get dirty and get out there in the world with us.
And for those of us who don't have a film crew, we got that. Check. Okay.
Yeah, you got it. You got one.
Or machete. Oh, I don't have the machete. What's one explorer habit or tip that anyone can use to bring like a little adventure into their everyday life, I guess?
My number one tip for people who want to have an adventure is to just do it. People say to me all the time, man, I wish I could have adventures like you. hey, anybody can have an adventure. That's the thing about adventure. It's no frills, no huge infrastructure needed. No matter where you are in the country watching this, right nearby you within a few hours is a state park or a place to go hiking or camping to explore something you've never done before. So, the outdoors is just waiting for us. Adventure is everywhere. And so I encourage everybody to take out a map and to go someplace you've never been before, near or far, and have your own adventure.
Josh Gates says if you want to be a Bilbo Baggins and go on an adventure, pull a Nike and just do it. See, like I put two.
Just do it.
Yeah, there you go. Josh Gates, I want to thank you for joining me today. If you are into real-world mysteries, big swings, and a host who actually gets dirt under his nails, watch Josh Gates on Discovery. New episodes of Expedition Unknown and Expedition Files on Wednesday nights. Check your local listings and stream full episodes at discovery.com. Thanks for hanging out with me, Josh.
Hey, all the best, man. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You know what happens when life throws everything at you before you even have a chance to figure it out? That's the idea behind Margo's Got Money Troubles, a series that follows a young woman navigating money, identity, and some very unexpected choices along the way. Today, we're joined by Ruthie Thorpe, the author behind the story, and Eva Anderson, executive producer and writer on the series, to talk about bringing this bold, funny, and very real world to life. Welcome to the show, you two. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right, Ruthie, this story started as your novel. What was the moment that you knew Margo's story had to be told in this way?
Well, I think the whole book really began to come together. I'd had this idea for a character who was both a mother and an OnlyFans model, but when I brought in her father, who is an ex-pro wrestler, that's when the draft really started to come alive, was watching the two of them together.
So, Eva, when you came on to help adapt it, what stood out to you about Margo as a character?
I mean, Margo's such an interesting character in Ruthie's book. She's very resourceful. She's scrappy. Early in the book, she gets pregnant, has an affair with her college professor and gets pregnant, but is very she doesn't blame anyone for it. She just decides to take what life has given her and make something of it. And because of that, you get to follow her into all these really interesting places. She's also just like very funny, and she's very loving, and she's a great mom, and she's a great OnlyFans model. She's somebody you really want to root for, Margo.
And the show balances humor with some really real life struggles. How did you find that tone without losing either side? And how much did you pull from real life moments?
I mean, it all came from Ruthie's book. She has this really interesting tone that's both very, very funny and at times very dark. And I think a lot of it was just our cast. We had Elle Fanning playing Margo, Michelle Pfeiffer playing Cheyenne, her mother, and Nick Offerman playing Jinx, her father, the pro wrestler. And those three could really balance so much in terms of putting them through really difficult things while never losing their heart and their humor and their love for each other.
And there's a lot of themes here. There's money, identity, motherhood, even some internet culture. What do you hope audiences take away after watching?
I hope that they feel more empowered to make their life something they want on their own terms.
The book's and the show's very non-judgmental, and I hope that they don't judge other people and they approach the people they love with love.
And now that people can watch it, what are you most excited for audiences to experience or react to?
Nicole Kidman wrestles Nick Offerman in a pro wrestling ring. And so that's pretty exciting.
I just love getting to see Elle Fanning, this feral and sort of bestial and very much a wrestler's daughter. And also the portrayal of that first postpartum period, I feel like is more accurate than I've seen on TV. And I'm excited for people to see her this way.
You buried the lead with Nicole Kidman and Nick Offerman there, all right?
Yeah, and Michelle Pfeiffer sings. That's also important.
All right, I'm excited for all of this. Margo's Got Money Troubles is now streaming on Apple TV, so you can catch up on the series and see why so many people are already talking about it. Hey, I want to thank you two for joining me today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having us.
Some stories don't fade with time, especially when they involve trust, friendship, and betrayal. The new 3-part Hulu docuseries, Friends Like These, The Murder of Skylar Neese, revisits the 2012 disappearance of a West Virginia teenager and the shocking truth that followed. It's a story told through social media, personal interviews, and voices closest to the case. So joining us this morning are director Claire Titley and former FBI agent and polygraph examiner Dr. Rob Ambrosini. Thank you two for being here. How are you?
Thank you. Good. Thank you.
All right, Claire, what stood out to you about this case and what made you feel like it needed to be revisited now, more than a decade later?
I think one of the things that made me that was so kind of shocking about this case when I first kind of looked at it was the fact that it's 2012 and it's quite a unique era in a way for social media, because it was that era where social media was new. It was kind of a new frontier. It was the kind of Wild West though as well. And teenagers were experimenting with it. They were just putting their entire lives online. They didn't have the hindsight that we have now about kind of, you know, what could possibly go wrong. But also it was an era where adults weren't really looking at social media. So nobody was kind of checking up on them. There were no sort of checks and balances. And that makes that generation of teenagers at that kind of time particularly unique. They're almost like the guinea pigs of social media. And
the series used Skylar's own words and social media posts that you said. How did that storytelling change the ways this story unfolds for viewers?
I think it was really important to us to try and give Skylar a voice. We didn't want her to just be a kind of a plot point in a true crime, you know, where she's just the kind of victim and has no voice. We really wanted her to have agency in telling her own story, which is harder than it sounds, you know, obviously when she's gone. But she left behind this incredible sort of archive of tweets, of digital messages, but also her own writing as well. So we worked very closely with her parents to make sure that we could just bring her voice kind of front and center, and that she could at least be a part of telling this story from the inside out. So we interview her friends as well, quite comprehensively, so that we can hear this story from the 16-year-old perspective, including Skylar herself.
And Dr. Ambrosini, you spent 24 years with the FBI. You've conducted thousands of polygraph exams. When you look at this case, what role did interviewing and behavioral analysis play in getting the truth?
Well, interviewing really played a significant role. And long before I became involved in the case, the two young girls, they were interviewed by case agents, state troopers, local police investigators. And during that process, you kind of started seeing this evolution of what really should be fact, right? You know, when things are fact, it doesn't change, right? The truth is the truth, and it's always going to be the truth. But there were indications during these interviews that really did result in kind of like this evolution of their story. And of course, when that happens, you know, the logical investigation is, why is this person changing that story, right? So this case is kind of about the behavior that's exhibited, the ideation, what's going on, what are they thinking, and how are they communicating? And that really speaks to the social media that you have here, which again was kind of in its infancy stage, if you will, compared to what it is now. So really, a lot of it did come down to the really significant interviews that the investigators were doing.
And one of the most unsettling aspects is how normal these friendships appeared on the surface. How does this case reveal about the hidden conflict, and especially among teenagers?
I think I think what we really wanted to do with this series was kind of remind people what it's like to be 16. It's very easy to forget when you become an adult, you know, and put that behind you. But about the fact that when you are that age, your brain behaves in such a way that, you know, your friends become much more important than your parents, than your family. Everything is very heightened. Your reasoning is off, if you like. Your idea of consequences, you know, is very different to that of an adult. And when you have that combined with social media that is completely I say unregulated, but unwatched by anybody else, that's where the kind of combination was kind of so dangerous, really, I think, particularly for that generation who didn't have the hindsight that we have now.
And Claire, after someone watches all 3 episodes, what do you hope stays with them?
I hope people do reflect on their own use of sort of social media, on their children, on their family as well, and remember what it's like to be that age. But also, I hope that they come away from this feeling like they know Skylar, and you know, she would have turned 30 just a few weeks ago. So that's a life that she didn't have. And she should have gone to college. She wanted to be a lawyer. You know, there's all this life that didn't happen. And I'd love for people to come away knowing and remembering Skylar as she was.
Hey, I want to thank you two for joining me today. Friends Like These, The Murder of Skylar Neese, with all 3 episodes available to stream now on Hulu. I want to thank you two for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Imagine waking up in somebody else's body and it's your worst enemy. Swapped follows a tiny woodland creature and a majestic bird who suddenly switch bodies and are forced to work together to survive. It's a fun, fast-moving story, but underneath it all, it really is about empathy, family, and seeing life from a different perspective. The film features a big cast, including Michael B. Jordan and Cedric the Entertainer, who plays a father at the center of it all. Cedric the Entertainer is here with us now. Welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
All right, good, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. The story behind this blends comedy with a real message about empathy. What stood out to you when you first read this script?
You know, I mean, I really love the idea of this, father-son kind of relationship. The son is kind of stretching out, trying to, experiment and find a new way in life, and his father that's trying to hold on to the traditions in which we kind of lived by, and those things that he felt make them safe and that he do as a father. And I think that, generationally, my real life is dealing with that. My son is that 25-year-old with bigger ideas than I had at 25, and the guts to go and try them sometimes. So you're like, whoa, I don't know if you can do that, right? And so I think that's what I really resonated with me, is this idea that the generations after you always push the line a little bit further down the street.
And the whole idea is about literally seeing life from somebody else's point of view. What do you think audiences will take home from that?
I think it's very poignant to the times that we live in, for all of us to be able to kind of embrace what it would be like to be in someone else's shoes, to be in their particular circumstance, and understand that if I just had an opportunity to see it from that POV, I could be more tolerant, I could be cooler, I could be, more accepting of differences. And I think that that's really important, that the youth see this. Of course, that's the energy that the animated movies are about, but the adults who take them to the movies will see it in their own adult way. These kind of themes that I think will allow for a great message, but a great moment of entertainment.
And when this project came your way, what was it about Swap that stood out to you?
I mean, really, I like the storyline of, again, of who this father was. I wanted to, we were expecting to be delivering a lot more comedy, but once I realized it was like, a kind of a sincere, discerning role, that was even greater. It was an opportunity to do something that was a little different than what I normally do. So, but I love playing these father characters, but this one was like, again, you understood that the comedy relief was going to come from somewhere else, and I was there to kind of help support the story, and that was great. There's like a different kind of acting skill that you get to use when you kind of like make sure that you're the person that's carrying the plot and keeping the story alive itself.
And being part of a cast like this with voices like Michael B. Jordan and Juno Temple, what was that experience like for you?
I mean, again, another exciting part to do it. I mean, of course, Michael B. Jordan. This was, even when we started doing this, was pre the hype of Sinners, so we had no idea he was going to become an Oscar winner and all these things. So, but but he was just a great talent, one that you knew had great potential of being a superstar. And of course, Juno is fun. I love Ted Lasso and her roles, and then Tracy Morgan's one of my great friends. And so, I was just looking forward to having a good time while all being on the same project.
All right, Cedric, thanks for joining us today. You can catch Swapped on Netflix right now. Definitely a fun one to throw on this weekend. Thank you for joining us once again, Cedric.
Thank you. Holler.
Millions of Americans are living with schizophrenia, but for many families, understanding the condition and finding support can feel overwhelming. One mother is sharing her personal journey along with a healthcare expert to bring more clarity and compassion to the conversation. Joining us now are Nicole Gillian and Erin Crown. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
So, Nicole, I want to start with you. What did the diagnosis journey look like for your family?
Yeah, Kayla, great question. So this started shortly after my kiddo graduated from university in Scotland. And I brought her back to the US when she started having delusions. And honestly, it took almost 2 years to get a diagnosis. And in those 2 years, she was misdiagnosed by a number of healthcare professionals, one of whom even said she was faking it. And of course, the entire time was on, medications that unfortunately were not helpful and really delayed the treatment that would move her forward in a positive direction. And I thought by bringing her home that I was doing the right thing, and learned, unfortunately, very quickly that in the US, our mental health care system is quite complicated and chaotic and complex. And unfortunately for my kiddo and myself, isolating. And that's why, quite honestly, I'm so happy to be here today to talk about home ground because of the isolation that we faced.
And Erin, from a clinical perspective, what are some of the biggest misconceptions people still have about schizophrenia?
I think, broadly speaking, people still carry this stigma around about schizophrenia, which is, of course, stigma is a misconception or a misunderstanding about a particular topic. And I think that there is still this misunderstanding about what it is, and are these people safe? Are they dangerous? Are they destined to a life of disability? And the answer is they are not all dangerous. In fact, the majority are not dangerous, and they are not destined to a future of disability necessarily. There are things like homegroundscz.com where they can go and find access to resources and find community, other people with lived experiences like their own, to reduce or minimalize the isolation and the loneliness that can occur within this disease state. And their care partners can go as well. This is a website that was developed in collaboration with people living with schizophrenia, care partners, and mental health advocacy groups. So it's very comprehensive and zip code specific.
And Nicole, how has sharing your story helped you connect with others going through something similar?
So I love that question, because for a long time, I didn't share my story. A long time, I didn't talk to anyone because of the stigma and the judgment that even though my kiddo has a brain illness, there was still this sort of rearing back and, well, what does this mean? Is this scary? Is she violent? Is there any of this kind of stuff? And she is as gentle as a kitten. And yet I was really fearful of talking about it. And then one day I said, you know what? This is ridiculous. This is not her fault. She's fighting this every day of her life. She wants to get back on track. She wants to get her master's and her PhD. She wants to get back in life. But the reality is this illness has other ideas in mind for her. And I realized the more I could talk about it, the more I could make other people feel comfortable, the more I could bring other people into the fold and help initiatives like this to create that community, because we are desperate for a community.
And Erin, and Nicole, both of you guys had mentioned home ground. Could you give us a little bit more detail as to what exactly it is and how it is helping families navigate through this?
Sure. So homegroundscz.com is a website that was developed again in collaboration with individuals living with schizophrenia, with care partners, as well as with mental health advocacy groups. And it's a wealth of resources and information, as well as an opportunity to connect with other community that are either living with schizophrenia or who are also care partners joining the journey of an individual living with schizophrenia. They can go to find everything from access to resources in their area to legal advocacy information and so on. And people can go type in their zip code and find things that are relevant to them right where they are.
And why is having access to clear, judgment-free information so important for families?
Nicole, why don't you take that as a family member?
Yeah, because unfortunately, a 1-minute story. There was one time when my daughter was released from a hospital, and when she was released, they put her on the corner of a street with a prescription in her hand. No ability to know where I am because she didn't have her phone, no understanding of what was happening to her, and yet was expected to navigate what she needed to do next. And so to have something like this, that from the immediacy of having a diagnosis to understanding where you're at, to knowing that there's a community like this out here is so powerful, because otherwise we're all on our own. And as a care partner, having something like home ground allows me to navigate. And I mentioned before the complexities, the healthcare system, the legal system, the financial system, even just the basic needs of what it means to have schizophrenia and work your way through it. Something like this could be invaluable.
And where can viewers go to learn more?
Homeground, SCZ.com.
Erin Crown and Nicole G., I want to thank you both for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having us, Kayla.
More people are turning to GLP-1 medications for weight loss right now, but there's a lot more to success than just taking the prescription. It's really about building habits that actually stick. Joining us now is registered dietitian and head of nutrition at MyFitnessPal, Melissa Yeager. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And a lot of people think the medication does all the work. Why isn't that the full picture when it comes to long-term success?
Well, GLP-1 medications are such a powerful tool, but they truly work best when paired with daily habits that support your overall health. So we need to be considering what we're eating and how our body is responding over time. Because while a prescription starts the journey, it's those small, consistent changes that are going to drive results. And that's exactly why we built MyFitnessPal GLP-1 support, so that users could log their nutrition, medication, and how they're feeling all in one place to get a clearer picture of their health journey. Because tracking builds awareness, allowing you to see how the foods you're consuming today are impacting your health goals, not just the medication alone.
And as you just kind of mentioned, the MyFitnessPal is helping people track more than just food. What does that look like for someone on a GLP-1 journey?
Well, as you're navigating a GLP-1 journey, there are so many moving parts to consider. And when you're trying to connect the dots between, was that side effect I recently experienced due to the meal timing or the last food I ate, you need a place to track it all together. And with MyFitnessPal GLP-1 support, users can log their medication, dose, injection site, meals, timing, and even side effects on iOS, eliminating the need for multiple tools. And for support beyond tracking, we have GLP-1 friendly recipe collections and educational resources available. Plus, with customizable reminders, it's easier to stay on track with your next medication dose as you build this into your new routine. And while we're at it, if you're trying to make that food logging process just a little faster, I recommend our AI-powered meal scan functionality, where you can simply snap a picture of your meal and move on with your day. Because once you start logging everything together, you can connect the dots in a way that wouldn't have been possible previously.
And for someone just getting started, what are a few simple habits they can build right away to stay consistent?
I love this question because as you're tracking, this is really becoming your personalized roadmap. You can start to see, am I getting enough protein, enough fiber? Am I staying hydrated throughout the day? All of these habits are key to consider, especially if you're experiencing a reduced appetite while on GLP-1 medications. In addition, I always recommend some sort of strength and conditioning program to help you as you navigate your weight loss journey.
And my friend, where can people go if they want to learn more or try this for themselves?
You can download MyFitnessPal for free today from the Apple App Store or Google Play Store and unlock tools like GLP-1 support.
Melissa Yeager, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's going to do it for this week's episode of The Dallas Download. We are so excited to be here, and we can't wait to do it again with you next week. Catch us right here on KDAF, Sundays at 5:30 a.m. And if you just can't get enough of the show, I know I can't, head to DallasDownload.com and follow us on social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all at The Dallas Download. Thanks for watching, and until next time, that was a show we like to call The Dallas Download.